Righto folks, welcome back to the channel. Just finished my morning run and heading home to do some weights and sauna. Thought I'd just throw this quick video up on my way home. People have been messaging me around the 18-year land cycle, asking me questions where we are at. Some people even messaging me saying it's all bullshit, sending me videos of other people trying to debunk it. How we use it, I'll explain. Our key fundamentals though to buying any property. 5 key fundamentals at a high level. Number 1, buy property for under its intrinsic value, at least half, if not a third. So firstly, you got to work out what the intrinsic value is for the asset you're looking to buy. If it's a unit, villa, townhouse, house, duplex, blocks of units, commercial real estate, work out firstly how much it would be to replace that, rebuild it in the current market. Talk to builders, developers, research it yourself, do a feasibility. But in short, it costs minimum 650, 700 grand to build a unit. These days, that's just build cost, and then you got to add the land on top of that. So as an example, I just bought a block of 4-bedroom apartments, a block of 4 2-beds and 1 garage each for 930,000 in regional New South Wales. And to replace it would be at least 3 million land construction costs to replace that. So less than a third of the replacement value I purchased that property for, because the price is like a pendulum. It'll swing under intrinsic value in the more slow suppressed markets. It'll then pick up and realign to the intrinsic value. And then in the boom, when all the stupid money starts pouring in, I like to call it, when there's at least 20% margin in a job, that's when developers will start building again, because they need to make a profit to turn a project over. So they're not going to just start building for the sake of it. So there's a lot of developers in a lot of regions like Sydney, Melbourne, regional New South Wales, Victoria, even Tassie, that are sitting on their hands. They have sites, but they're not going to build it. They even have DA approved sites, but they don't build it until there's profit in the job for obvious reasons. Why would a developer go spend $6 million, $10 million to have an end value of the site of half? So the market has to move. Every market goes through slowdown. Every market goes through booms. Every market goes through downturns. Every market goes through long stagnant flat periods. So picking the markets where the price is well below intrinsic value, number 1 key point, because it's only a matter of time when the market picks up, realigns to the intrinsic value, and then exceeds it. And then that's when you see developers start building like crazy again, throwing up new high-rise apartment buildings or new house and land, urban sprawl developments. We're seeing in the Gold Coast now, Trump's going to throw up Australia's tallest building. Classic example of where where the boom ends up. The Gold Coast is coming towards the tail end of the boom. That's when we see the oversupply scenario happen towards the tail end of the boom, when developers start releasing that stock, downturn. So classic property economics 101 is getting deals for at least half, if not a third of its intrinsic value. That's our number 1. Number 2 is strong yield. At least 6 to 8% yield, between 6 to 8. I don't look at anything less than 5. 5 is our cutoff. We occasionally buy something with a 5-ish% if the rents are under market and it's got upside to push the rents to get it into 6 to 7% yield. But between that 6 to 8% is a sweet spot, because you don't want to go less than 5% yield or 20 times earnings is fair value for property. It's another way of valuing property is using the earnings. And if you're buying property with a 5% yield, it's fair value. When you buy a property with a 1, 2, 3, 4% yield, the price is overvalued relative to its earnings. Don't do it. It'll get you stuck with the banks. Don't get conned with all the blue chip bandits and saying, oh, it's blue chip, don't worry about the yield. Fucking bullshit. It's not blue chip. It is overvalued. That's number 1. So that's our number 2, strong yield, because the rental yield is a leading indicator for a growth cycle. You never find residential real estate with yields of 10, 11, 12% in metro markets or large regional hubs in solid areas, because by the time it hits about 7, 8, price then follows. Rents rise first, creates attractive yields, that draws on investors, prices then follow. So strong yields between 6 to 8% is a leading indicator for growth cycle. And on the other side of the coin, lower yields between 2, 3, 4% is a leading indicator for a long, stagnant, flat, subdued market, because typically you find the price rises, compresses the yields, the local wage can't keep pushing it higher. It takes a good decade for wages to rise, for then to allow people to pay more in rent, borrow more money to support another growth cycle. That's number 2. Number 3 is the 18-year land cycle. That's where it comes in, which is our framework we use at a macro level to work out firstly where we sit in the market. Today, equivalent point of time, early 2007. That's at a macro global level. We're in a global cycle. It's been happening for over 200 years. You can trace them all back in the US, UK, and in Australia. You can look at all different asset classes because everything is impacted differently as the cycle plays out. It's not just property. So we use it as our global macro framework to give us guardrails to work out, firstly, personally, what asset class I want to be in. I'm all out of equities because we're coming now into a period where in 2008, 9, 10, stock markets globally went backwards 50%. And that was during the GFC. Every second one is a fucking big one. And this my shoulder's getting sore from holding my phone. This next one is going to be more like the 1990 recession we had to have on steroids. It's just happening. History is repeating like clockwork. We've got, back in the 90s, we had Paul Keating, who Labor government driving big spending, big government, big inflation, rates went up to fucking 17%. Here we are again. We've got Jim Chalmers and Albo and Chris Bowen, the three stooges. They are doing the same. Big government, big spending on renewable plan. They're moving away from coal-fired power plants. They're looking to go all renewable. That's creating a lack of supply of energy when we've got to transition into new technologies. So electric vehicles, AI, data centers, massive demand on electricity, and they're shutting off the supply. So inflation is broad-based, driven by energy costs. So energy is already forecasted to rise another 25% over 2026. That will filter through the whole economy because everything needs energy. Everything is tied to it. Inflation's going to keep picking up. Rates will follow. That will end the cycle. When businesses are going broke and they can't pass on the costs and they start laying people off and unemployment goes through the roof, we'll go through a stagflation, just like what happened in the 70s, which is good for property investors. You just need to be able to hang on because you'll find your real estate will explode. The RBA will come in 28, 930, drop interest rates, print a lot of money, just like during COVID, set off another asset explosion because it's devaluing the currency. So you got to work out with the 18-year land cycle, will give you the clarity of where we firstly sit in the market, what asset class do you want to be in, because it's, for me personally, it's definitely not equities. I'm fully out of that. It's not commercial real estate. That gets smashed towards the tail end of the boom when all the businesses are going broke and they're shutting the doors and they're not paying rent, regardless if they sign on a long lease. If they can't pay rent, they won't pay rent. So regardless of the lease, and it takes 2 to 4 years for a commercial space to get a new tenant. So best to not be leveraging hard into commercial real estate at this stage of the cycle, because you could easily lose 50% equity if you lose your tenant, and it can take you up to 4 years to replace it. If you can't float it during the down periods, it can fucking wipe you out. So I'm not getting into it, even though I could, even though there's big shop buyers agents saying, oh, I'll go and just buy 3 or 4 houses, buy a bloody warehouse on the fringes of a metro city for well over the intrinsic value. That's a great way to go broke. So 18-year land cycle, we use it to give us guardrails. Firstly, work out, okay, where do we want to be exposed? Do we want to be geared into the ASX, or do we want to be geared into global shares? Because you always need to carry cash when you're carrying real estate, and you don't want to just be sitting in a offset or a savings account you can put to work a lot harder So you work that out, and then when talking property, we use it to work out, okay, there's not one property market in Australia. If you look at long-term trends and overlay it with the 18-year land cycle, you'll find in the first quarter, Sydney, Melbourne outperform, just like what happened from 2008 to 17. Those markets become too expensive. And actually, I'll go back again. Sydney, Melbourne outperformed in the first quarter, just like what happened from 2008 to 17. When the mines slow down in Perth, regional WA, Brisbane, regional Queensland, when the mines slow down in Darwin, when the mines slow down, the jobs dry up, people start flocking back to Sydney and Melbourne, where the jobs will be. The most diversified economies with all the jobs. When I worked in the construction days, this is when I first started coming across the 18-year land cycle, I worked with builders doing residential fit out, construction work. I worked with commercial builders building new office space. I did a lot of remediation work. So I did a lot of work on government jobs around basements of new metro lines, and I did a lot of high-rise apartment construction, a lot of basement works for Crown Casino and down in Barangaroo and all around Australia when I worked up the ranks in the corporate world, and then I eventually worked in development. And I saw that the construction workers are the same workers. For a couple of years, I'll be in the likes of Sydney, Melbourne, building high-rise. That's where the demand is, that's where the jobs are. Then those projects will slow down, they'll dry up, just like what we've seen from 2018 to date. There hasn't really been a huge amount of high-rise construction going on in Sydney, Melbourne, but there has been a lot of investment into public investment. So all the metro stations, both in Sydney, Melbourne, as well as all the investment that's going up into the southeast Queensland. So that's when the construction workers then moved out to those types of projects, building new roads, tunnels, metro lines, water treatment facilities, etc. And then those projects are starting to slow down, the jobs dry up, but now the mines are picking up. So they're now FIFO, fly in, fly out work to the likes of Perth, regional WA, Queensland, Darwin. So we see those regions getting the demand. So it's cyclical construction. So back to the 18-year land cycle framework is what we use. I have found through studying the cycle and looking at long-term trends across multiple markets, there's not one property market. There's many markets and sub-markets, and history shows the first quarter, Sydney, Melbourne outperform. They get too expensive. People then decentralise, head out into the likes of regional New South Wales, regional Victoria, Tassie, ACT. That's when those regions outperform in the second quarter, just like what happened from around 2015 to 21, 22. Then we go through the mid-cycle slowdown. This time around, it was called COVID, where we see the stock markets take 20 to 30% correction. The one before was the dot-com bust in 2000. And we then kick off into the land boom in the third quarter. That's when people decentralise into the second tier metros, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide. That's when they take off and outperform, just like what happened from 2020 to date. And now we're edging into the fourth and final quarter, where people again get priced out of those markets and head out into their respective regions. And Darwin, when the mines also pick up and run hard, all the FIFO workers start flying out there on big bucks, pumping that money into those local economies. That's when we see like Darwin's pumping, regional WA, regional Queensland, all outperform in the fourth and final quarter until the lights come on and the party's over and they go through hard downturns, and then the demand shifts back to Sydney, Melbourne, and Sydney, Melbourne are away at the races again. So that's how we use the 18-year land cycle as our guardrail framework to operate within, to work out what market to focus on to buy, when to stop buying, which is key because a lot of people get caught up in the fuss and keep buying. Even buyers agents are pumping people into Brisbane and Townsville. They're all going to get caught out. They're all buying peak market and will end up either holding a property for a good 10 years with no growth or even in negative equity. So it's key. The framework will give you the clarity of work out when to buy and stop buying, but then also when to renovate, when to develop, and when to even sell out of, to really capitalize on the cycle and capitalize on the growth to outperform the market, to keep growing and moving forward, not only for the upside, but also to protect the downside, to make sure that you have sufficient funds and capital during times of crisis. As you come through the final stage, you want to be cashed up to sail through higher rates, which the framework will give you the guide of that. I locked in all my rates back in November last year, before it all became mainstream that rates are going to go up, because the framework gave me that. The framework shows that towards the tail end of the boom, just like what happened from 2000 to 2007, or from the mid 80s to the late 80s, or in the 60s, when we're in that final credit expansion, property goes hard, inflation runs hot, rates always go up to end the cycle. So I locked them all in last year, thank God. Now they're going to go up hard. I can see even the RBA pushing the cash rate to 4 or 5%, which is the ultimate setup which will end the cycle. So that's the 18-year land cycle framework. That's our point number 3, key fundamental number 3. Number 4 is we like to then make sure that we're buying in a region where there's a growing population and public investment. This is a pretty straightforward one. All the large metros and the large regional hubs, we typically stick to the large regional hubs with at least 20, 30,000 population and growing. So not going out to say like Broken Hill or Mount Isa, where those towns can boom bust hard and don't have long-term stability as the populations are in decline. So making sure that the towns are pretty resilient and solid, that have existing infrastructure and a pipeline of projects. And then our 5th key fundamental is then getting down into the suburbs where they'll gentrify in time. So just like what happened to Redfern, Surrey Hills in Sydney, St Kilda in Melbourne, New Farm in Brisbane, even Bondi Beach in Sydney, all these suburbs used to be rough, tough back in the day. And then government comes in, sells off public housing as they continue to move people out into other areas, as they continue to build more urban sprawl. They sell off public housing, they build new roads, metro lines, tunnels, investment into light rails. That then spurs on private developers, private investors come buy sites, knock them down, redevelop them into beautiful new estates. New bars, restaurants start popping up. It becomes bougie. That happens over a 10, 15, 20 year time horizon. So we like getting in early, where I can see that areas are in cracking locations within half an hour, 45 minutes to the CBD, within a large metro town in the suburbs, that not right in the thick housing commission pockets. I've bought a couple of them, in the process of selling them. They've done well, but they've just got high management, when they're right in the thick of it, you don't want to be right in the thick of it. Be on the fringe, on the outskirts, but if you can understand when the government's starting to sell them off, you can find that out through working in the industry like I have. I know suburbs where they're selling them off over the next decade, so we're eyeing them off in terms of timing, when to enter those markets. You don't want to buy in straight away, but once they're starting to program over 10 years, start entering once they've sold at least 50% off. That's when you can buy ex-housing commission homes, just like Minto. Back in the day, Minto in Sydney near Campbelltown used to be full houso. Now it's completely gentrified because they sold them all off. So there's those types of suburbs But then I get not everyone wants to be in ex-housing commission suburbs, so we tailor the strategy to the client to work out, okay, what type of suburbs they would prefer, because everywhere improves over time, everywhere gentrifies, but it's a matter of finding the diamonds in the rough type suburbs where you can get in well under the intrinsic value, strong yields, and then you hold it through a market cycle, and then over time the area gentrifies and then the market flourishes. Just like buying, you know, just like buying terraces in Balmain or Redfern, Surrey Hills back in the day. In the 90s, you could have bought terrace homes, beautiful Victorian terrace homes in the 90s for like 100 grand, 150 grand. These days they're going for 3 to 5 million. That's gentrification. So if you can get on the right side, buy as many as you can, and you only ever wish you bought more. Till next time, thanks for watching.